Now the earth was astonishingly empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep. What is this deep that verse is talking about? Welcome to my channel, Carving the Bible. On this channel, I am carving the Bible into stone, into granite to be specific, and I'll explain a little bit later exactly why I'm doing that. In the process of carving the Bible, I noticed certain things that I've never noticed before because I'm taking the time to carve it letter by letter, word by word. And that time gives me an opportunity to reflect on what it is that I'm carving, what is being said, and I want to share some of those things with you. I think you'd find it interesting. My name is Francisco, and on this video, I am working on the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1, verses 1 to 15. There is one word that I had not really noticed before. There's a word there that I think changes my perspective on what Genesis is really about. Imagine that you're lost at sea. You're treading water, it's dark, and all you hear are waves crashing about you. There's nothing there, it feels like total chaos. That's the emotion that Genesis gives the moment before God begins the creative work in that story. That one word brought to mind a scene from The Sixth Sense by director M. Night Shyamalan. And let me play it for you, and I think you'll see what I mean.
What were you talking about with your soldiers when I came in?
De profundis clamo ad te domine. It's called Latin.
De profundis clamo ad te domine, which translates as, "From the depths I cry to you, O Lord." It's the first verse of Psalm 130. Now, in the movie, the boy, Cole, is being haunted by spirits of the dead. He's terrified, and he is crying out for help. But that experience of feeling in the depths, of feeling overwhelmed by something that you cannot control and maybe even something that you fear, is not just because you're haunted. Most of us aren't haunted by spirits of the dead, but we still have that feeling, and it can be triggered by a whole slew of things, from illness to addiction, incarceration, famine, war. And that's the emotional context that I missed in the beginning of Genesis. Genesis 1 doesn't just tell us what God did, it tells us how it felt the moment before God began creation. But for context, I think it'd be useful if I read these verses, the verses that I'm carving today. That would be Genesis 1, verses 1 to 15. In the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and the earth, now the earth was astonishingly empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and God separated between the light and between the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And it was evening and it was morning one day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the water, and let it be a separation between water and water." And God made the expanse, and it separated between the water that was below the expanse and the water that was above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and it was evening and it was morning a second day. And God said, "Let the water that is beneath the heavens gather into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, seed-yielding herbs, and fruit trees producing fruit according to its kind in which its seed is found on the earth." And it was so. And the earth gave forth vegetation, seed yielding herbs according to its kind, and trees producing fruit in which its seed is found according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And it was evening, and it was morning, a third day. And God said, "Let there be luminaries in the expanse of the heavens, to separate between the day and between the night. And they shall be for signs, and for appointed seasons, and for days and years. And they shall be for luminaries in the expanse of the heavens, to shed light upon the earth." And it was so. Now, the word that I noticed is in verse 2, and it's deep, or the deep. Let me read that verse to you again. "Now the earth was astonishingly empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep." What is this deep that verse is talking about? At first glance, it seems rather straightforward. It's talking about deep water. I researched this word. In this case, the deep is talking about chaos. It's talking about a formless void. It's talking about desolation. Now, I'm not a Bible scholar, but I looked up the word in Hebrew, and the word that is used is tehom. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I do not speak Hebrew, so if I'm not, please feel free to correct me or comment on that. I don't mind. But in the original language, it is supposed to mean deep or chaotic waters. In the Near East, water was often used to signify chaos, disorder. Let me tell you a short story. Recently, Hurricane Milton hit the west coast of Florida. And the day after, the Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, found a man floating out at sea about 30 miles offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, clinging to a cooler. He had been caught in the middle of the hurricane at night, floating in the middle of the ocean. De profundis clamo a te Domine. From the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Can you imagine being caught in the middle of the ocean at night as a hurricane is passing through, clinging on only to a cooler? You don't know if you will survive the night or just grow tired and sink beneath the waves. That's the feeling that this word tehom at the beginning of Genesis expresses to me. And it's a feeling that we don't just get when we're out in the ocean in the middle of the hurricane. It's a feeling that's easy to get just trying to cope with the things that daily life throws at us. The positive thing is that the man was rescued by the Coast Guard. I think that verse 2 of Genesis also gives us a sense of hope right before creation begins. It says, "The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, over the darkness." And the word hovering evokes this image of a mother bird fluttering above a nest, waiting for new life to emerge. The harbinger of this hope is that Spirit of God about to create light. Can you imagine that being that man lost at sea during the hurricane at night, in the dark? And suddenly you notice the light of dawn beginning to emerge. What a sense of relief. What a sense of hope that you have survived the night and now finally this chaos is being converted into order. That first act of creation, let there be light, brings that same sense of profound emotional release. If you read Genesis through this emotional lens, it's about hope. It's about order coming into the chaos of life. And I think it also reflects the sense that there is something sacred about creation, there's something sacred about life that is bigger than we are. So that's what I got out of this particular set of verses as I was carving them. But why am I carving the Bible into stone? Why am I carving it into granite, of all things, one of the hardest rocks available to us? It's mostly because I believe that the media that we use today, mostly paper and digital media, is very, very fragile. And I believe that the Bible says something about who we are today as one of the foundational texts of Western civilization. And because of that, I think that it deserves a more permanent medium. A while back, I saw a documentary on the Assyrians. And it was very interesting because they considered themselves the peak of civilization at that time. But now, several thousand years later, what do we have of them? Almost nothing. What we have of them is mostly in stone or clay. So I thought, let me try to preserve the Bible in the same way. Let me put it into stone. I haven't heard of this being done. Obviously, certain verses have been carved into stone, things like the Ten Commandments or the Beatitudes, but not the whole Bible, not everything in it, word by word. And I'm carving it in English and the original language. In the case of Genesis, that would be Hebrew. I know the whole project sounds a little bit crazy, but there it is. If you found this interesting, I hope you continue to follow along as I carve the Bible. The chaos, the darkness, the light, all of that is just the beginning. You can also check the description below for more details on this project, and I hope that you join me in the next video.